This afternoon. Stay on with us, Siddhant. We have Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat, with us. Also joining us on the broadcast is Sana Hashmi, Fellow Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation. My first question is to Mr. Prabhu Dayal. Mr. Dayal, I want to understand from you what you make of the dynamics of, the Brics summit that's currently underway, and also post the expansion. How does it really play out overall for India? We've been discussing, there are warnings being sent out that this must not be looked at as an anti-West group. That said, does it complicate India-US ties given that this composition does include players like China and Russia, and we do know what equation they share with the West?
Well, thanks for having me on your show. You're right in saying that sort of signal does go from Brics that it is somewhat anti-West. And you referred to the presence of China and Russia in this organization.
Also Iran, Mr. Dayal. Now there's Iran.
With Iran. Yeah. Now with Iran there. And incidentally, I've served in Iran. And the most common chant used to be death to America, big Satan, etc. So the relations continue to be extremely hostile between these two sides. And if the West perceives it as being against itself, then certainly there is some reason for it to think so. Of course, as Siddhant Mishra pointed out in his introductory remarks, India pursues a policy of multi-alignment.
Yeah.
And we have made it clear to both sides that we are very independent when it comes to devising our foreign policy. And we are not shaping anything against any other country. When we attended the last Quad summit, for instance, which was held in the United States, Prime Minister Modi very categorically said that Quad is not directed against any other country. Similarly, I'm sure we have sent out the right signals that our participation in Brics is not directed against the West. Rather, we want to pursue a policy of multi-alignment. We want to have good relations with as many countries as possible. And we see our participation in Brics as being a way to strengthen our relations with a number of countries which are already members of this organization and some others which are partner countries.
Oh yes, absolutely, which also includes trading better in the Middle East. So that's going to be another great area for India to explore, going deeper into Brics and engaging with the Brics member nations. Mr. Dayal, coming back to you in just a bit, but I want to take this across to Sana Hashmi and talk about the bilateral that's scheduled up next between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping, which is taking place after 5 long years. We've seen the tensions that have broken out essentially between the two nations. Some sort of breakthrough seems to have been made, Sana. How do you look at this overall?
No, it's definitely an important development. Specifically, it's happening after 5 years. The last meeting that happened between Prime Minister Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping was in 2019. It's definitely a very important breakthrough. Our military establishment, our Ministry of External Affairs, they have been negotiating with China for the past 4 years.
Yeah.
I won't call it a reset. It's definitely a breakthrough. It definitely paves a path for Prime Minister Modi's meeting with Xi Jinping. As in, this is something that all the major world leaders have been doing. They have met Xi Jinping over the past 4 years. So I do feel this is a step in the right direction. We have to keep the channel of communication open, but I'm not very optimistic about the prospects of the boundary dispute resolution. It's definitely a breakthrough that the Galwan standoff has ended, but we have to wait and see if we are going to get something more out of this agreement, because the previous agreements have been violated in the past. So what is new this time? The meeting is definitely important, but we have to be cautious about the prospects of India-China relations in times to come.
Mr. Dayal, are you of the same opinion? Because, that kind of a warning or perhaps caution has been sensed from the top brass here in India as well. We've heard it from the army chief very recently say that the first most priority is to restore the trust between the two nations. So India is exercising caution, to say the least.
Well, I agree with Sana completely. She's right in saying that it's a breakthrough sort, but at the same time, one has to see what really happens on the ground. And that's what the army chief had also said, that while at the diplomatic level, China appears to be very nice and forthcoming and says that it's making serious efforts to resolve this issue, but on the ground, we don't see that sort of thing happening. And so, while this agreement has been very good, disengagement at key friction points like Depsang and Demchuk will represent a potential step forward towards stabilizing one of the most contested borders in the world.
Yeah.
But given the past reputation of the Chinese, which go back on agreements and rubbish these agreements whenever convenient to them, I think one has to be very watchful and see what actually happens on the ground. I do think that the Chinese have taken this step, keeping in mind the summit which is taking place today. They certainly want to improve the atmospherics for this summit, but let's see what happens afterwards. So Sana was absolutely right in saying that we have to be very watchful and see what happens.
So there's one factor at play, which is, one looking out for the China approach next very closely, and then perhaps, we're going to come in with a counter. But Mr. Dayal, what's also interesting is the manner in which India is very closely monitoring this quote unquote Western insensitivity towards India's security concerns, and that in the recent past has been highlighted perhaps more than ever before. So India, India participating at Brics summit at a time that countries like Canada and the United States perhaps have been making insensitive remarks, have been sidelining India's security concerns, is also very crucial, don't you think?
I think you're right. It is crucial because it does send across a message that we have this policy of multi-alignment and that we are free to pursue our foreign policy as we please. The pressure which the United States, in conjunction with their Five Eyes partner, Canada, has been exerting on India has been absolutely unacceptable. For instance, the Canadians have been making allegations and not furnishing proof, but claiming to furnish proof. Incidentally, I may mention that when Trudeau appeared at the inquiry, which was a federal inquiry, he was under oath and he couldn't lie. So there he said intelligence inputs were given to India. But all along, he has been proclaiming that they have given India credible evidence. Now, what happens in the context of the relationship with the West? The West needs India. The United States needs India, not just for the Indian Ocean sort of policy that it is pursuing, not just for containing Chinese expansionism, but also as a supplier of defense equipment. India is the world's biggest importer of defense equipment, and the United States has been coveting our, purchases.
But so far, none of these developments, Mr. Dayal, have obstructed the security ties India and the United States share.
I think we'll be very watchful.
Yeah.
We will see how the United States fashions its policy, how sensitive it is to our feelings, and if we feel that it is being really unfair in making allegations which are unsubstantiated, I think we will send across a message that we will source our defense imports, for instance, from other sources, like France, for instance, which has been much more sensitive, or any other country, including Russia. Russia is still a very, very big supplier of defense equipment to us. So we will keep our options open. And it is very important because the West sees always any opportunity to have benefits from India, but at the same time, it is not very sensitive to our feelings.
And Russia has proven itself to be a long trusted ally. So this relationship is also very crucial to the Indian interests. If we speak of trade, if we speak of the several other aspects, and that's been highlighted by both the leaders, President Putin as well as Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We'll come back to you, Mr. Dayal. Sana, what's also being spoken of is the manner in which China perhaps seems to have bent down a little or, has seemingly gone soft towards Indian interest, given the manner in which it has now started facing a setback on the trade front, business front, and that's why it's looking at India. Do you think that has had a key role to play in the kind of military and diplomatic ease of tensions we've seen in the latest?
No, absolutely. I do believe and I do see that China has become concessionary with respect to India. And one of the major causes and reasons behind this is both Russia and China want this BRICS summit to be a success.
Okay.
And India is also being perhaps perceived or seen as a disruptor when it comes to SEO and BRICS, from the Chinese perspective at least. So the idea was to